would you agree that like this idea of being Christ-like, I think in concept, in theory, is a beautiful thing, but with the intersubjectivity of this idea, doesn't it ultimately become sort of corrupted by people one way or another? Like, do you think that that's a realistic standard for people to follow? Because to me, it's always going to be subject to human interpretation, isn't it? And I don't know if there's any way around that, but like, I don't know. To me, that gives me some pause, because like when somebody says I need to be Christ-like, like, well, that doesn't really mean anything to me, because my Christ-like is always going to be different from somebody else's Christ-like, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you make a good point in the sense that can something be twisted or corrupted for nefarious means? Yes. Has it? Yes. So yeah, of course it's possible. I think that's probably possible with anything. But for me, I think if you start with the red letters, if you start with the Sermon on the Mount, if you start with this idea of, what if you love those who love you in return, what credit is that for you? And everyone does that, right? But you have this higher standard of loving even those who don't love you and blessing those who curse you, doing good to those who hate you, overcoming evil with good, and not responding with more, evil or violence or retribution and things like that. So that's what I'm talking about, right? And so I think there are examples of people who aren't even Christians. Like Gandhi read the Sermon on the Mount like every day, like the last several years of his life. Every day he woke up and read the Sermon on the Mount. Most Christians don't do that. I don't do that.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? I think that there's a thing where if you start with Jesus and your intention is, what did he talk about? What was he about? How did he live his life in a way like, okay, that there's something great there. There's something really positive there. And I think it sets us on a trajectory that leads us away from a whole lot of things that are pretty toxic that I would say are biblical.
Interesting. Yeah. To me, I guess, like I struggle to see how Jesus is the necessary component in that, or Christianity even is the necessary component in that. Because I like the humanist label, the sentientist label, something else I take on. And to me, I kind of see that as all the good things you just said there, but there's no religion involved in that. There's none of this, the problems that come with that. There's still problems with it. Don't get me wrong, because it's still just as subject to human interpretation as anything else.
Yes.
But it also doesn't have the baggage that Christianity does. It does. Like, to be honest with you, it's like
bringing up our baggage, man.
Yeah.
Well, we have some.
There's there's an unspoken hierarchy there. I mean, like, even if we deconstruct it, I mean, you and I can deconstruct Christianity all day. And I love these conversations, but like, it's hard because like, I know that you and I would be the minority in this view. And I don't probably forever. I don't know. Actually, I don't know that. I don't know what Christianity is going to look like 50 years from now. But
well, I take some hope in this deconstruction movement that we're kind of talking about, because what's happening is people are moving away from these toxic ideas, these toxic theologies that really ultimately are about controlling people, keeping them in a place of fear and shame or guilt. These are the things they're deconstructing. These are the things they're moving away from. They're saying, no, I don't think that this is who God is. I think if there is a God, I think he's like Jesus. I think, Jesus says, if you've seen the Father, you've seen me. And so, okay, well then let's look at Jesus as our example of what God is like and what we want to be like as ourselves. And I think if Christianity starts getting back to something like that, and again, this is also something, though, not in the context of church. You know what I'm saying? So you use the reference about hierarchy and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, frankly, I think Jesus is anti-hierarchy. Twice he says, he points first of all to the Jewish hierarchy. He points to the Pharisees and he says to his disciples, do you see how these Pharisees lord it over others? Not so with you. You are all brothers and equals. Right. And then he also points to, in another place, he points his disciples to a secular hierarchy. He points to the Romans, and he says, look how they also, lord it over one another. Not so with you. You are all equals and brothers. And, don't call any man father. You have only one Father. That's your God in heaven. Don't call any person teacher. You only have one teacher. That's Christ. And so there is an implicit. Now, I know in practice, some Christians don't do that. They ignore that completely. Yeah. But I'm saying, I mean, I do that. I've walked away from that, and I don't go to a church. I don't attend any kind of a church. I don't call anybody my spiritual authority. And I kind of feel like I shouldn't. It's not necessary.
Yeah, I'm all about, and I think you're right. Jesus does talk about breaking down the hierarchies of his times, but in that same context, right? Isn't he also just saying that he's the authority? Is he just telling people to follow him? Like, doesn't it just create a new kind of way of,
yeah.
I mean, he had his followers. He literally had followers.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's what I see, and I don't know if you see this or not, but this is what I see that's different. What I see in Jesus is someone who isn't selfish, right? So when he says "follow me," he's saying, emulate my behaviors because I'm someone who isn't violent, because I'm someone who isn't hierarchical. Jesus doesn't lord it over anybody.
Unless you're selling stuff at the temple, then he's gonna throw some.
Exactly. But so example, does Jesus lord it over people, or does he take off his outer tunic, wrap a towel around his waist, which is what slaves did, get on his knees and wash his disciples' feet, and then after he does it, he sits up and says, "Do you know what I've done for you? I've set you an example that you should follow, and now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them." In other words, he models. He doesn't just say it; he models it. So if we're following him truly, we're in a posture of coming underneath people. We're serving them. We're not demanding they serve us. Right. We're being people who are radically humble and serving and blessing other people around us, regardless of who they are. It doesn't matter if they're Samaritans or Gentiles or, Jesus doesn't care about those things. So, I mean, yeah, sure. He has followers. Yes. He's saying, follow me. But it's an alternative way of living and thinking and being that, I mean, I get your point.
Yeah.
In the sense that we don't need, why do we need Christianity? Why do we need Jesus?
If somebody today, let's say somebody today was practicing the same things that Jesus was doing.
Yes.
Right. And they said, like, you have to follow me to come do this thing. Like, we would say that they're followers of that person. Like, and then there is like a guru to apprenticee kind of relationship there a little bit. Right. I mean, like, that's kind of what the followers of Jesus were. They did see him as, and they called him Lord. Right. Like there is something there. And that's something that I can't separate that. I don't know. And that troubles me. I think that gives me trouble.
I totally, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, absolutely. If there's somebody who's demanding submission, right. I think that's a dangerous thing. I tell people all the time, actually, if you're part of a church that's demanding submission, run. Submission isn't something that people should demand of you, but it's something, I think in the case of Jesus.
Do you think Jesus demanded submission?
Not in that sense. No, I don't, not in the way we're talking about it. I don't think he's saying, or else. I mean, because there's always sort of this threat associated with this, you better obey me.
Yeah. But you don't have that kind of atonement. That your theology on that is different.
Very different. Yeah. Because actually the Old Testament doesn't breathe a word about eternal torment, not a single verse about eternal torment. So like a couple thousand years, God slips his mind, forgets to mention, oh yeah, I'm going to roast some of you for eternity. I'll get to that later.
I got you.
And then when Jesus is supposedly using that kind of language, that hell language, ironically, he's quoting Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, and they're not talking about where anyone goes after they die. That's not the kind of language. That's not what's being talked about. It's not where anyone goes after they die. Yeah. So again, I wrote a whole book on this. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But this is a great rabbit hole that we're going down. We do have some other callers want to get.
Okay, let's take some calls.
I'm really glad you're open to having these conversations with us, Keith. Thank you for giving us that perspective on this show.
I love this stuff.